What would happen if a CEO disguised himself as a janitor to expose the truth about his own company? What would drive him to risk his reputation just to become invisible? On a gloomy morning, the back door of warehouse number 212 in the Logan and Vance network quietly opened. A middle-aged man, thin with specks of grey in his hair, stepped inside wearing a worn janitor's uniform and dust-covered shoes. No one looked up or asked his name. They called him Donnie, a new name, carrying no past, no hint of authority. What the entire warehouse didn't know was that this quiet man was actually Damien Cole, the CEO of the whole corporation, a name that had vanished from the news for nearly a year, no longer appearing at conferences or signing any internal memos. He hadn't stepped back. He was executing a silent plan, returning, not with a voice, but with open ears and eyes that missed no detail, because some things cannot be seen from the glass offices on high floors, like a glance passing by, a shrug, or the subtle coldness behind a command. Damien walked down the main hallway with a mop in hand. A young shipping worker stopped him abruptly. "Uniform doesn't meet standards. Go change it." "What's with that grumpy face?" Damien just bowed his head, whispering, "Just starting my shift, sorry." No one asked further. They assumed he was from the bottom of the system. No power, no voice, nothing worth noticing. All eyes slid past as if he didn't exist. But for Damien, that was a golden opportunity. Hidden in the lowest role, he could hear whispers, witness behaviors never recorded in management reports, and sense the fear lurking in every step. Unnoticed, he was memorizing everything, from irregular delivery times, the tension of night shift workers, to how supervisors like Carla managed without paperwork, relying only on looks and twisted smiles. Damien once believed company culture was shaped by mission, vision, and value statements. But standing in this place, once his pride, he realized true culture shows itself not in strategic meetings, but in how a newcomer is treated on their first day. That's why he didn't react, didn't reveal his identity. To see the truth clearly, sometimes you must choose to be invisible. And in that silence, Damien knew one thing for sure. What he was about to face was not mere unprofessionalism, but a system running on fear, abuse of power, and covert agreements so well hidden that even he once failed to notice them. But this time, it was different, and Donnie, the anonymous janitor, would be the gateway to a silent but irreversible upheaval. Donnie's first night shift began in silence, but this silence was not peaceful. It was thick and heavy, like dirt accumulated beneath a glossy paint. The smell of stale sweat, decaying paper, and chemicals mixed with something else, an invisible yet persistent scent. Fear. Damien stepped into shipping warehouse number 3, once praised as an efficient model in the recent quarterly report. But after just an hour in that space, he understood why data could never reflect the truth. Employees worked with evasive eyes and cautious gestures, every word carefully weighed as if someone was always standing behind them. No one laughed, no one joked, no one asked his name. The only person to break this atmosphere was Carla Moss, the night shift supervisor, a tall woman with tightly tied blonde hair and eyes sharp as a razor. The moment she saw Donnie, she snapped, "Old man, Area B is dirty. Why haven't you cleaned it? Don't tell me you don't know your job." Damien nodded quietly, took the tools and moved on. But as he turned away, whispers followed clearly enough. Probably some preferential entry type. These kinds don't last more than 3 days. He said nothing. That familiar feeling surged again, the feeling he had when he started this company with bare hands. But now, he was not here to build. He was here to strip away the fake paint covering deep-rooted corruption. In a corner of the warehouse, Damien found an old, crumpled note hidden behind a pile of scrap paper. The messy headline read, "Do not rehire list, September." Beneath were 5 names, each with vague reasons. Troublemaker, difficult to cooperate, inappropriate attitude. The striking part was that 3 of those names were people he recognized, previously rated outstanding by HR in last year's report. Damien folded the note, tucked it inside his jacket, eyes slightly squinting. He realized this place had problems beyond management. It operated like a silent purge system. Anyone who spoke too much or asked too many questions was quietly erased from the system. No tears, no reports, just disappearance. On the corridor back to the equipment room, he saw Carla signing a stack of delivery invoices. No dates, no clear shipment info, no delivery personnel. The warehouse manager beside her silently nodded. Damien slowed down, pretending to mop the floor nearby. When he looked up, Carla's cold eyes scanned him. "Don't stare. Focus on your work, Donnie." He nodded, but inside his mind a note was being written. Anonymous shipment, approved outside procedure, witnessed firsthand. Every action, every glance, every subtle warning was recorded. He was not here to clean floors. He was here to expose every layer of dust clinging to the very system he once trusted. Damien no longer doubted. What he saw was not the carelessness of a few individuals, but a sophisticated, silent, and deliberate system. In his first 2 weeks on the job, he discovered at least 7 instances where inventory checklists did not match warehouse records. Sometimes boxes were missing, other times prices were unreasonable, and on some days, invoice numbers were just random strings of characters. Strangely, no one reacted. No manager called back, no department checked. They acted as if such discrepancies were normal, and anyone who asked was labeled a troublemaker. Once Damien directly asked an employee named Luis, responsible for stock entries, "Why does this batch code differ from yesterday's?" Luis flinched, glanced around nervously as if afraid someone was eavesdropping, then chuckled quietly and whispered, "You're new, right? Here it's best to work fast, don't ask questions." Then he walked away, leaving Damien standing among towering shelves, his heart heavy as stone. It was this silence that was most terrifying. It didn't just conceal wrongdoing, but also numbed the conscience of those still wanting to do right. Not wanting to waste time, Damien secretly installed a small recording device under the tool shelf near the goods receipt area, where he knew every night something was processed off the books. He also discreetly sewed a hidden camera into his chest badge, the plastic tag everyone thought was a cheap prop. The first data collected was clear. Carla signing off without checking goods, a male voice directing orders remotely over the phone. "Ship it out tonight. Don't wait for paperwork." Damien recognized that voice. Though absent from meetings for almost a year, he could never forget Terry Sloan, the regional director known as the company's profit machine. Now it was clear. The man behind all the anonymous shipments, the untraceable records, was Terry. But Damien could not act prematurely. If exposed, the system would shut down and evidence erased overnight. He had to remain in the shadows, and while mopping the floor, he was patiently tracking every trace, every whispered word, like a hunter stalking prey, unaware it's about to be unmasked. Damien always believed that within any toxic system, there are still a few people who quietly choose conscience over self-interest. But it took nearly 3 weeks before he began to see small cracks in that silent shell. That morning, after a tiring night shift, he found a cup of coffee placed on a recycled trash bin, still gently steaming, without a name. At the bottom of the cup was a folded piece of paper with a hastily written line, "Be careful with the 2 a.m. shift change. Someone is secretly watching the cameras." No signature, no other words. But Damien knew someone was speaking to him in the only way possible, silently and at great risk. The next afternoon, while organizing plastic bins at the back of the warehouse, he accidentally, or rather deliberately, noticed a strange barcode loosely stuck on a shelf. At first glance, it seemed like a mistake, but when Damien scanned it with a handheld reader, the system opened a hidden folder never shown in the normal user interface. Inside was a series of unusual data: orders without receipt codes, deliveries scheduled after business hours, and overlapping lists with names removed from personnel records. A deliberate attempt to erase traces, but not thorough enough to fool everyone. That evening, Damien decided to take a small risk. In the workers' break room, he quietly sat next to a man around 40 years old, with short hair and sunken eyes from lack of sleep. His name was Eli, an inventory clerk who had worked in this warehouse for nearly 8 years. Damien gently asked, "Have you ever noticed anything strange about late deliveries?" Eli didn't answer immediately. He sipped his coffee, eyes still fixed on the wall, then slowly said, "Yeah, I reported it once, but the next week my hours were cut. 2 months later I was switched to the dangerous shift." He paused, then looked at Damien. "You're new here, so take my advice. Don't care." But it was precisely that resignation that hurt Damien more than any threat. A bad system doesn't just crush the weak. It silences the good people as well. Yet he knew Eli hadn't lost all hope. The proof was in that advice. It didn't come from hatred, but from fear that if anyone spoke up again, they would be swept away like so many before. And for that reason, Damien could not stop. In this place, where everyone pretends not to see, he had to look closer, because he wasn't just seeking justice. He wanted to give back to people like Eli and the silent coffee giver one thing they had lost: trust. Since that night, Damien began closely monitoring the night shipments. He pretended to be a sleepy janitor, wandering into the wrong area. But in reality, every step he took was a link recorded by hidden cameras. Then opportunity came. One rainy night at 1:17 a.m., the back warehouse lights were still unusually on. Damien waited in a shadowy corner near the emergency exit, where no internal cameras were installed, pretending to dust off some storage bins. He heard footsteps, not hurried, but deliberate and unmistakable. Black Italian leather shoes, the kind favored only by those in management. A man entered, no security, no clipboard, no log signing, silently approaching a row of newly arrived crates, inspecting labels, opening one box and scrutinizing its contents. It was unclear what he was looking for, but the behavior had nothing to do with routine supervision. Through a slightly ajar door, Damien quietly activated his chest camera. Just a brief moment, but enough to clearly identify. Terry Sloan, the man featured on industry magazine covers titled "The Man Who Turned Warehouses into Cash." Terry was not the type of manager who stayed in the office, and that now became the strongest evidence. His presence there at night had no reasonable explanation unless he was personally controlling off the book's inventory flow. Damien didn't need to hear a word from him. Terry's actions, a quick glance toward the warehouse camera, closing the crate without a sound, spoke louder than any words. This was not negligence. This was possession. And if Terry was the mastermind, Carla was merely a pawn. Damien immediately backed up the footage onto 3 encrypted hard drives. 1 copy sent to his personal lawyer's office, 1 stored in a secure peripheral safe, and 1 hidden deep in the old janitorial supply closet. For the first time in weeks, he felt his campaign had struck the heart of the corrupt system. But he knew well the shadow Terry cast had not yet lifted. And when those in power feel watched, they will not remain idle. His silence was becoming the loudest noise in the building, and soon those lurking in the darkness would be forced to turn around. The only question was, who would blink first? That morning, as Damien stepped into the warehouse, he immediately saw Louise, Carla's close assistant, waiting by the receiving desk. She held a familiar clipboard, her expression trying to conceal something. "Donnie, Carla said you're in charge of this shipment. Remember to inventory everything exactly as listed here," she said quickly, avoiding his gaze. Damien took the clipboard. At first glance, the inventory list seemed normal, but after reading a few lines carefully, he noticed the item codes didn't match the delivery dates, quantities were excessive, and some units weren't even in the internal code system. A trap hidden inside the routine work, and if he made a mistake, even a small one, the system would automatically flag a warning, and the person held directly responsible would be Donnie. Damien stood before the shelves, clipboard in hand, quietly exhaling. Then he pretended to follow orders, moving boxes into the sorting area, but deliberately let the internal camera record a small error, placing a box 1 row out of place. Enough to be called into a private meeting, but also enough to defend himself if blamed entirely. Just as predicted, before afternoon, Dre personally summoned him to the office. Louise, Carla, and Terry were already waiting. The door closed softly, no lock sound, but the atmosphere felt suffocating. Carla spoke first. "You transported the wrong item codes, violating the warehouse receiving procedure." Damien lowered his head, hands resting on his knees, voice steady. "I thought that was the instruction on the sheet you gave me." Terry nodded slightly, voice deeper. "For a newcomer, we expect caution, not excuses." Every word, every breath, every resentful glance were recorded by the device quietly running under Damien's shirt. And in his mind, there was only one thought. They were acting exactly as he intended. Every accusation, every threat without evidence, every public blame, all were reinforcing the case he had been building all along. When the meeting ended, Terry gave him a final look. "This is the last warning. One more mistake, and you will have to leave." Damien nodded, eyes dull like a frightened man. But in truth, he had just confirmed something crucial. They were not just manipulating the system. They were trying to eliminate anyone getting close to the truth. And this time, he was not alone. In the shadows, the traps were ready to tighten. But who the real prey was, no one yet knew. When people fear being exposed, they start talking more. And those words, if recorded at the right moment, can become weapons. That night, Damien, like every other, finished his late shift carrying an empty chemical container. But instead of heading straight to the supply room, he veered toward the far corner of the hallway, near the manager's break room. That small room, behind frosted glass, was usually only lit when discreet conversations took place. And as he expected, the light was on. Through the slightly open door, he heard Carla's voice, low and hurried. "He knows more than we thought. Ever since Eli wasn't fired, I've been suspicious." A deep male voice cut in. "Terry, don't panic. Just push him out quietly, like the others before." Louise's voice interrupted, trembling slightly. But what if he's recording? What none of them knew was that while they spoke, a tiny hidden recorder had been placed earlier that morning, nestled behind the coffee shelf in the room. Every word of their exchange, from plans to get rid of Damien, to how they had transferred question, askers to remote branches, was being captured. That night, Damien did not go straight home as usual. He headed to the electrical control box where the internal network passed through. From his fake badge, he pulled out a small, secure device, plugged it in, and pressed a single button. Within 12 minutes, all the data he had gathered over 5 weeks, videos, audio, images, documents, was encrypted and uploaded to a private server accessible only to 2 people, himself and a long-time lawyer ally. The game had now turned. He was no longer the prey tracing shadows. He held the scissors and the noose tightening around those who thought themselves untouchable. They still thought he was Donnie, the old, manageable janitor. But Donnie vanished the moment the data transmission light glowed blue. And Damien Cole was waiting for the one moment he needed to say, "Now it's my turn." On Monday morning, meeting room 3 on the 2nd floor was suddenly called into use. Damien received a brief notice. "Be present at 9:30. Important." When he entered, the room was icy cold. Terry sat at the head of the table, arms crossed. Carla stood beside him, her gaze cold. Louise locked the door from behind. On the table lay a printed paper, a termination of employment decision. Grounds cited: operational errors, security protocol violations, cultural misfit with the company. "You can sign here and leave quietly," Terry said. "No lawsuits, no fuss." Carla added, as a warning, "Those before you didn't get on this much courtesy." Damien looked at the paper, feigning trembling hands. I don't understand. I only followed Louise's instructions." Louise pressed her lips, silent. Damien quietly pressed a button hidden in his sleeve, and suddenly the screen behind the table lit up. A video immediately appeared. Carla signing off on undocumented shipments during the night. Terry's voice echoed through the speaker. "Ship the lot without scanning codes. Don't record it in the system." Carla jumped. Terry stood, his eyes darkening. "What are you doing?" Damien said nothing. The next screen showed an audio recording from a secret meeting. If he speaks out, we're finished. Take him out. Terry's very voice. The final screen displayed Damien removing his name tag, shedding the uniform jacket with the caption, Damien Cole, Chief Executive Officer, Logan and Vance. No one spoke. Louise was stunned, eyes wide open. Carla trembled and took a step back. Terry struggled to contain his anger, voice harsh. This is data breach. You have no authority. But he was cut off by a knock on the door. 2 security officers entered, followed by a man in a long coat holding sealed files. Mr. Terry Sloan, Ms. Carla Moss, Miss Louise Grant. You are under internal investigation for suspected system manipulation and corporate ethics violations. Damien said nothing more. He stood straight, adjusted his sleeve, eyes fixed outside the window. The silent battle had ended, and he didn't need to raise his voice, for now his silence was the sharpest accusation of all. A week after all the truths were revealed, the atmosphere at Logan and Vance's operations center had completely transformed. Steps grew lighter, eyes no longer avoided contact, and the break room was no longer a place where whispered fears lingered. Damien did not appear with the air of a powerful CEO. He wore a simple shirt, carried no documents or assistants, only 2 plain envelopes. In the meeting room, once ruled by Carla and Terry's commanding stares, he stepped in quietly. Without a long speech, he said simply, "Silence was once used to cover up, but that very silence can protect justice if used correctly." He called on Eli and Maya, 2 people who had quietly supported him, asking for nothing, promising nothing. Handing each an envelope, he said, "No one noticed you standing up, but I did, and this company should too." Inside were promotion letters. Eli was appointed head of inventory. Maya took the role of operations supervisor. No applause followed, but respect filled the room with every glance. The atmosphere shifted not because of new titles, but because of a clear message. Those who do right, even quietly, are remembered. That afternoon, Damien stood on the balcony overlooking the warehouse. A young employee helped a colleague gather remaining stock, while another group checked old inventory lists on their own. No orders from above, no rewards needed. Everything was naturally reviving, not by pressure, but by the ethical roots long buried. Damien smiled. Justice does not always come from loud voices. Sometimes it begins by choosing to be silent at the right moment. In the modern business world, sometimes it's not data or reports that reveal the true state of affairs, but how a newcomer is treated, or how a violation is hidden under the name of procedure. Damien Cole not only runs a company, he redefines how a leader should listen, not from a boardroom, but from the very depths of the system. This story reminds us that true power doesn't lie in being heard, but in choosing silence, then speaking at the right moment when no one can ignore you. If you believe that lasting change must begin with courage and quiet observation, please like this video, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss inspiring stories ahead. And don't forget to leave a comment with the phrase, "silent strength," to let us know you also believe in the power of timely silence.